All right, we are in 1 Samuel chapter 24. We've been following the pursuit of King Saul as he's going after David. David, in the previous chapter, 1 Samuel 23, had gone to deliver the city of Keilah. The enemy had come in, attacked them, and they were in a bad way. David was close by with his 600 men. And they contact David, and David goes and delivers the city of Keilah. And in the process of that, he goes into the city. Battle's finished, but King Saul hears that he's gone into the city, and he says, "Aha! I've got him in a cul-de-sac. I've got him inside these city gates, and he can't get out. There's only one way in and out, and I've got him in there." And he makes a statement in verse 7 of chapter 23. God has delivered him into my hand. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. God did no such thing. God said that he would not deliver David into his hands. And yet Saul reads it the other way. And so he's got David trapped, he thinks, and he's going to go in after him. And David consults the Lord again and said, what about these people in this city? I've just delivered them. Are they going to deliver me into the hands of King Saul? And God told him, yeah, they will. And so David and the 600 men leave. They go out on the run. They're out in the hills and the countryside and places where they can escape Saul. And he's in hot pursuit after them. And that's sort of where we're picking up. And we come to chapter 24. And the battle, Saul got called away right at the last second. He was closing in on David. We closed class with this last week. David was around a big hill, a mountainside, and Saul's men are chasing him around the mountain, and David's barely escaping, and just as Saul is closing in on him, there's a report that comes, the Philistines have attacked elsewhere in the land. Saul breaks off his pursuit against David. At the last moment, David's delivered from that. He goes to battle the Philistines elsewhere. That's over. Now he's coming back in pursuit of David. Let's pick up our reading in 1 Samuel 24, verse 1 and following. Now when Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, saying, "Behold, David is in the wilderness of En-gedi." Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men from all Israel and went to seek David and his men in front of the rocks of the wild goats. He came to the sheepfolds. He came to the sheepfolds on the way where there was a cave, and Saul went in to relieve himself. Now David and his men were sitting in the inner recesses of the cave. The men of David said to him, "Behold, this is the day which the Lord said to you, Behold, I'm about to give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it seems good to you." By the way, I couldn't find that. I couldn't find that reference. I don't know if you've looked for that. I think they're kind of making this up. I think they have some wishful thinking here, and I don't know that the Lord ever said that to David. But they're reading into this, that this is what the Lord intends. And so they give it up almost like it's a quote from somewhere. But I couldn't find it. I don't think it's there. I think this is just what his men want David to do. And they're throwing God's name into it to give it some kind of strength or weight with David. Then David arose and cut off the edge of Saul's robe secretly. It came about afterward that David's conscience bothered him because he'd cut off the edge of Saul's robe. So he said to his men, "Far be it from me, because of the Lord, that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to stretch out my hand against him, since he's the Lord's anointed." David persuaded his men with these words and did not allow them to rise up against Saul. And Saul arose, left the cave, and went on his way. So this is the conscience of David inside the cave. Can you imagine? You know what that's like when you come from the bright outside to a dark, dim inside. How well do your eyes work? They don't work at all. They don't work. It takes a while. This morning on the way here, as we back out of our driveway and we start to go forward, we're facing east. Guess what's in the east? There's that big old sunshine, and we just go, whoa! We're reaching for sunglasses and visors and squinting and everything else we can do. And then going down the road forward, you see this big light. It just stays there in your mind, you know, and you see that light in front of everything, whether you've turned the corner or not. Well, imagine coming into this cave, and there's David's men deep inside. 600 of them. Big cave, isn't it? It's a big cave. He's got 600 men. And they're hiding all over in the dark behind rocks or wherever it might be. You can only let your imagination fill in some of those gaps about where all they could be hiding in there. And Saul can't see them. They're not making a peep. And here is an opportunity, and David has to decide what the right and wrong is with that opportunity. Those things happen to us in life. We've got people who mistreat us, and an opportunity arises where you've got them over the barrel. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to take revenge? Or are you going to think about this situation the way God would think about it? So David has this struggle going on in his own conscience. The Philistine threat is squashed, and Saul's pursuing David. How many men did the text say Saul took with him? How many? 3,000 choice men. These are the cream of the crop. These are the best warriors he's got. David, we said, had 600. Saul takes 3,000 of his choice soldiers to go after David. He knows that he needs the odds in his favor. He knows that this is a formidable foe, even though he's got David outnumbered to this degree. Here's something to remember. I'm going all the way back to 1 Samuel chapter 14 and verse 6. Then Jonathan said to the young man who was carrying his armor, they're facing the Philistines, and Jonathan and his armor bearer sort of escape from the camp of Saul by themselves, and they go to investigate the enemy. And Jonathan said, "Come, let us cross over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. Perhaps the Lord will work for us, for the Lord is not restrained to save by many or by few." 2 men against an encampment of Philistines. The Lord's not restrained. He's not limited. He could do this with us too. Many or few doesn't matter to God. Inconsequential. And so they go up, and sure enough, they're routing the enemy. And pretty soon his father joins in with him. I think that is a great lesson. It's a great lesson for individuals. Are you outnumbered at work? In your family? Are you outnumbered? It doesn't matter if you're on the Lord's side. The Lord can win by many or few. It's a good lesson for congregations. The smaller the congregation, the greater impact of this lesson. The Lord's not restrained to save by many or few. Read through the churches of Asia in Revelation chapters 2 and 3. And you'll find a small little congregation in there. They are of a little strength. And it doesn't matter. When the Lord opens a door, it stays open. When He closes a door, it stays closed. And so many or few doesn't make the difference. Do you remember Gideon? How many men did he end up with in his battle against the Midianites? 300. Now here's a Bible trivia quiz. How many Midianites were there? Tough on the memory, isn't it? 135,000 of them. And he's going at them with 300. And God whittles them down to 300 on purpose to teach the lesson about reliance upon God. And he's not restrained to say by many or by few. So here comes Saul with his 3,000 soldiers against David's 600, running for their life, hiding from him, trying to not have the conflict with him, trying to honor the Lord's anointed, as difficult as all of that is. And they're somewhere in the vicinity of the rocks of the wild goats. That's verse 2. What kind of place would that be? If it's the rocks of the wild goats, what comes to your mind? Mountainous, crags, crevices, difficult places. Really a place that only a sure-footed animal would be able to survive. You would look at that, maybe you've seen some of the pictures of rams or goats on the side of a mountain. It looks like it's a sheer side on there, and somehow there's that animal on the side of that standing on the smallest jutting out of rock that there could be, and they just look as sure-footed as they leap from one place to another. And so he is in this area of the rocks of the wild goats. And along the way, Saul runs across the sheepfolds area. Caves. Why would they call that sheepfolds? All right, here you are, you're a shepherd, you're out with your flock of sheep, you're looking for green grasses and still waters, and that tells you it wasn't some lush field flowing and rolling across the countryside where the shepherds went with their sheep. They'd have to find a section of grasses to eat here or there and go from place to place, but the rest of the area wasn't so friendly to them. And so here they are, and they're hunting for these places, and here comes night. They need a place to enclose their sheep in a safe way so the shepherd can be over the mouth of that and guard them from any predators or from the sheep getting out at night. And they're using the caves in this mountainous area as a sheepfold. And so that's why they would name it that. And David and his men are deep hidden in one of those, and that's the one that Saul picks to enter into. Verse 3, Saul went in to relieve himself. And that's the way most translations translate that. New King James has to attend to his needs. And the suggestion there is probably what you're thinking about, that he's going in to use a bathroom facility. That's the indication you get from that kind of language. I'm not sure that's what that's about. As a matter of fact, I don't think that's what it's about. But that's the way most translations handle it. That's the way most of them use it there and think of it. That particular phrase is used only here and one other place. And the other place where that phrase is used is in Judges 3 and verse 24. And the man's name is Eglon. He's a king. When he had gone out, his servants came and looked, and behold, the doors of the roof chamber were locked, and they said, he is only relieving himself in the cool room. There's our phrase. King James and the American Standard translations have the more literal meaning, and the more literal meaning is this: to cover his feet. Saul went into the cave literally to cover his feet. The idea of most translations that he's using a restroom break is just a suggestion. There's something else that can mean. And it fits with King Eglon in the book of Judges. And it fits with something else. there is a different terminology, but the same idea. It's in the book of Ruth. And you'll remember that there comes a point when she goes to Bethlehem with her mother-in-law. And she's going into the fields of a near kinsman by the name of Boaz. And her mother-in-law is playing matchmaker between her widowed daughter-in-law, and this near kinsman Boaz. And she instructs her one evening, after he has had his feast, after he has well drunk, he's going to go to sleep. And she instructs her daughter-in-law to go in secretly and uncover his feet. It's going to jar him awake. You ever had that happen in the middle of the night? Cool breeze is in the house. Maybe your windows are open these nights when it's so pleasant outside. But the covers get jostled on the bed and your feet get uncovered. And you wake up because they're cold. And she instructs her daughter-in-law, widowed, to go and lie down by him and uncover his feet. And so the idea would be that Saul has gone into this cave, and caves are much cooler than the outside. And so he goes into the cave to relieve himself, to literally cover his feet, to take a break, a rest stop, to lie down, to go to sleep. And his feet are covered. He's lying down after this pursuit of David. He's weary, and he goes into the cool cave to cover his feet. And this is where David spots him, and how and why he is able to cut off a section of his garment without Saul even being aware. That makes the most sense when you compare it to King Eglon, when you compare it to the book of Ruth and uncovering the feet of Boaz when he has been lying down asleep. And so Saul is in this cave and he's covering his feet, and David spots him, and then the rest of this ensues. Your comments, thoughts, ideas? Just helping our minds to work through possibilities of this text. Then, verse 4, the men of David said to him, "Behold, this is the day which the Lord said to you, Behold, I'm about to give your enemy into your hand. You shall do to him as seems good to you." David arises, cuts off the edge of his robe secretly. So, that seems to be their wishful thinking. Here they're doing something that Saul did earlier. When David was enclosed in the city of Keilah, and he's inside the city gates, and Saul says, "Aha, he's trapped, and the Lord has delivered him into my hand. This is the Lord's doing. This is the Lord's will." That's what Saul did at Keilah. Now David's men are doing the same thing. This is the Lord's will. God's doing this. This is the working of God. He's delivering him into your hand. Go kill him. Do whatever you want to him. This is the day the Lord's promised you over your enemies, and you can go get him. God hasn't said that. This is their wishful thinking. This is how they want to read the events that are unfolding. How often do we do that in life? Where certain things happen, and it looks like just a way is opening up for us to do this thing, and we go, "Well, that's what the Lord wants me to do." We need to be so careful with that kind of thinking and assigning things to God that He's not clearly stated that way. We have desires of our own, and when we find a way to put God's name on it, we think it's valid and we can do whatever we want to then. And that's not at all what God has said. And so David begins on that course, but he doesn't follow through with it. So God has allowed the opportunity. Who's that teaching? Well, it's teaching King Saul something. Saul's going to learn something about this. But it's also teaching David. It is part of the character training of David for the throne. He's learning, he's growing, he's expanding his trust in God. And so Saul's learning something, David's learning something, David's teaching his men something. God's allowed the opportunity, but why? And it's very different from what David's men have suggested. So here's David developing his character and fitness for the throne, and then something clicks in David's heart, in his conscience, in his memory about the Lord's anointed and how you need to treat that. Something clicks in him, and he turns back from what his men have suggested. First, they had sway on him. They've really given him a pep talk to go get Saul, and David begins that, does something that bothers his conscience. He begins to think about it, and he turns back. And he's going to persuade his men otherwise. So he cuts off the piece of his robe, and it just bothers him. Saul's the Lord's anointed. God's involved with Saul. God's allowing him to stay on the throne for time being. God cares about Saul. And later in chapter 24, just a few verses down the road, David's going to explain that even more when he comes out of the cave to call after Saul and talk to Saul about it. David's going to explain that more fully when we get down the road in this chapter. Verse 7, David persuaded his men. And that word persuaded literally is to tear apart. He persuades them in the most powerful way. He dismantles their way of thinking. He tears it apart. And he brings shame upon them for what they have endeavored to do. And so that's the idea of the word persuaded here. He's rebuking them rather sharply, reminding them of God's will rather than their own. And David allows Saul to get up and go out of that cave unharmed, and he's none the wiser about what's just taken place. And he's going to let him get out of that cave a pretty safe distance before David emerges from the cave and calls out after him. You have ideas here, thoughts? Yes. Right. Right. Literally, as a king was made, we see Samuel pouring oil over them and giving them a message about the Lord's choosing of them for a certain role. It's appointing them to that role, to that task, and the anointing with the oil in the process. And that is as if, this is God acknowledging you for this role. He is the Lord's anointed, unfaithful, yes, but God is bringing him out of that role as king slowly and gradually. He's allowing them to remain there, even though he knows David is going to replace him. So David is anointed as the next king, but he's not taken the throne yet. So there's a transition period here. Yes, both men have been anointed by God. One is in removal and one is in replacement, and both men are anointed. And as David has been respecting Saul, Saul should have been respecting David. And it's not working the other way.
So all of this is playing out, and David is letting the Lord do his work, even though he could have killed him at that point.
It is to be God's timetable and not David's. And David's allowing, you're correct, David is allowing God's timetable to run out.
So when they come out of the cave, David says that to Saul. He's trying to tell him that, hey, I had you, but the Lord is still
Yes. Yeah. And David, when he comes out, his point is that God had allowed you to be in my hand to slay you. I didn't do that. Therefore, I am not your enemy. Why are you treating me this way? That seems to be the line of logic that he has. God has delivered you into my hand. I could have killed you, but I didn't. And that's not the way a man treats his enemies. Therefore, I'm not your enemy. And you should understand that. And why are you pursuing me this way? And I'm no threat to you. I'm trying to help you. And so that's the logic David is going to pursue with Saul when he comes out of the cave. But yes, you're correct. God has a timetable for things. We're going to be reading this shortly in Romans chapter 12, where Christians are instructed about how to treat enemies. How do you treat them? And what we're seeing here in 1 Samuel 24 is Romans 12 being played out in an Old Testament scenario. And we're going to see that God's way works. And God is allowing David to take David is allowing God to take the vengeance. That's not for David to do. He leaves that in the hands of God. And he's giving Saul every opportunity to do the right thing. And that's what we're supposed to do with people today, even those who don't treat us right. Other thoughts? All right. Then we'll look forward here into verse 8 and following. And this is a reading from verse 8 through about verse 15. Now afterward David arose and went out of the cave and called after Saul, saying, My Lord, the king. And when Saul looked behind him, David bowed with his face to the ground and prostrated himself. David said to Saul, Why do you listen to the words of men, saying, Behold, David seeks to harm you? You get that? Saul is surrounded by a group of men who are feeding him this lie. And David asked him why he's listening to them. Did David listen to his men? He did not. He started to, and then he realized better by thinking about God. And he stopped listening to his men, and he started leading his men. And he's asking Saul, why are you listening to these men who are telling you this lie that I'm out to harm you? Verse 10, Behold, this day your eyes have seen that the Lord had given you today into my hand in the cave. And some said to kill you, but my eye had pity on you. And I said, I will not stretch out my hand against the Lord, against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. I'll not stretch my hand out against my Lord, my king is what he means. I won't do that. For he is the Lord, Jehovah, Yahweh. He is Yahweh's anointed. Now, my Father, see, indeed see the edge of your robe in my hand, in that I cut off the edge of your robe and did not kill you. Know and perceive that there's no evil or rebellion in my hands. And I've not sinned against you, though you're lying in wait for my life to take it. May the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge me on you, but my hand shall not be against you. As the proverb of the ancients says, out of the wicked comes forth wickedness, but my hand shall not be against you. After whom has the king of Israel come out? Whom are you pursuing? A dead dog, a single flea? The Lord therefore be judge and decide between you and me. And may he see and plead my cause and deliver me from your hand. So David waits. Saul's out of the cave. Evidently he's at a distance away where David's not in fear that he can't get away. And he comes out and he calls after him. And verse 16, we didn't read that. We didn't quite get there. But in verse 16, Saul recognizes his voice. Is that you, David? So there's enough distance there that he recognizes the voice, not necessarily the face. And he gets the voice. And so you notice something about David's attitude toward Saul. How does he address Saul? What is it? With reverence, respect. King, Lord, Father. He uses terms of endearment, kindness, respect. He reveres him. He gives him that honor. He does not disrespect him. Has Saul been doing a dirty deed? Yes. Has he been practicing evil against David? Absolutely. Abusing him, mistreating him. David, when he comes to talk to him about it, King, Lord, Father, he doesn't disrespect him. One of the biggest problems and difficulties that we'll face is when we go to confront somebody with error and we disrespect them along the way. It's not received well. Doesn't matter what else comes out of our mouth. When we hurl a personal accusation, when we speak with disrespect, dishonor, whatever comes after that falls on deaf ears. You have put the bars up. And so it matters how we do that. David is doing this the right way. He's not haughty with it. He's not flaunting. He's not trying to humiliate him. He's trying to reason with him. Think about Galatians 6, verse 1. Brethren, even if anyone is caught in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore. Get them back in their previous place. Get them back in that rightful position they were once in. Restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, each one looking to yourselves so that you too will not be tempted. And that's the pitfall. Watch yourself in this. You are going to confront somebody who has been caught in a trespass. You know it, they know it, and you're going to confront them. Watch yourself so that you're not tempted. Because that temptation is there not to do that in a gentle spiritual manner, but to come with dishonor and disrespect. And that destroys the process you're trying to achieve. So not only does David not strike the king down, he doesn't show him disrespect when he calls out to him. Then we learn something in verse 9 about why do you listen to the words of men saying, behold, David seeks to harm you. Saul has developed a certain paranoia. God has removed him from the throne, and that process is taking place. Samuel has left him. Samuel's gone. He's got no counseling from God. He's on his own. He's looking over his shoulder everywhere. He's developed this paranoia, and he struggles with his own guilt, and he has others surrounding him to tell him he's right. Others surrounding him as yes men. And he perceives David as a threat. They know that. He's hurled a spear at him on more than one occasion. Everybody's observing this. He sent his men out to kill David. They all know he doesn't like David, and they're feeding him a line. Yeah, David's your enemy. He's trying to kill you. You got to get rid of him. And he surrounded himself with these kinds of people who are feeding on his weakness. Here's another big pitfall we need to watch out for. When we feel wounded, when we feel hurt, when we feel vulnerable, we tend to surround ourselves with people who will tell us we're right. And we may end up going in a congregational setting from this person to that person that we befriended in a special way and pour out our heart to them and tell them all of our woes and all of our wounds and all of our hurts and all of our thoughts and paranoia. and guesses about a person and their ill motives, and they will surround us and feed us what we want to hear and play on our weakness with us, and we'll get everything we had hoped to get. They'll tell us that we're right, the other person's wrong, you're right, their motives are evil, they're wicked people, and they're out to get you, and you need to do this, that, and the other thing, and I wouldn't stand for that. We need to be careful of that. That's what happened with King Saul. And he's got men around him who have a motive all their own. They're not concerned about God's will in this. Would you look with me at Proverbs chapter 6? Probably know where I'm going already. Proverbs chapter 6, beginning in verse 16. There are 6 things which the Lord hates. Yes, 7 which are an abomination to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that run rapidly to do evil, a false witness who utters lies, and one who spreads strife among brothers. Saul is surrounded by those kinds of counselors. And we tend to surround ourselves with those kinds of people when we're feeling hurt about something and we want a shoulder to cry on, and they feed into our weakness. Be careful of that pitfall. David is more discerning than Saul. David did not listen to his men. He listened to God, and he turned back from taking the life of King Saul in the cave. And then he presents the evidence. As he comes out of the cave, he's got a piece of the robe of Saul. And he said, I was this close to you. This is how close I was. This is how unaware you were. This is what could have happened. And so he shows him the evidence that's there in verse 11. And he uses 2 words that I think are most interesting. He tells him with a piece of robe in his hand, for in that I cut off the edge of your robe and did not kill you, know and perceive. How is the word know and the word perceive different? Okay. Here is the fact in my hand. Now, perceive what that means. Understand. Let that soak in so that you don't just have the fact that I have a piece of your robe. You can see that. But I want you to perceive what that means. Let it sink in, soak in, get the understanding of that. Realize what that says about me and my relationship to you, that I don't intend you harm, that I'm on your side, that I'm trying to help you, and what you're doing doesn't make sense. Perceive it. Let the understanding flow over you. Sometimes we pick up on facts, and we can quote the facts, but we don't get the understanding. And sometimes we see the facts when we want to apply them to somebody else, but we fail to see how they apply to us. So he wants him to let this sink in, and that's the word perceive that's there. Verses 12 through 15, when David says, may the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge me on you, but my hand shall not be against you. This is Romans 12, 14 through 21 in action. Let's take a quick look at that. We have just a minute or two left. Romans chapter 12. Very practical chapter in the book of Romans. And you get down to verse 14. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not be haughty in mind, but associate with the lowly. Do not be wise in your own estimation. Never Pay back evil for evil to anyone. Respect what is right in the sight of all men. If possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Never take your own revenge, beloved, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. But if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing you will heap burning coals on his head. And do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. What we're reading in chapter 24 of our text is that text being played out in real life. And David is believing God. Next question, does it work? And the answer is, it does work. When David tells Saul these things and leaves vengeance in the hands of God, and he explains all of this to Saul, Saul has a moment of repentance. He changes course, he changes tone, he comes to his senses. Does it last? No, it doesn't last. He turns right back around and wants to go after David again. But for the moment, it works. It accomplishes what God wants to accomplish. And that's what we need to do. Everybody's going to make their own decision about what they want to do with the potential that we lay before them by treating them the way God wants us to treat them. Then it's their choice. What are you going to do with that? That's up to them. And God will take care of it. And David believes God. And that's exactly what he does here. And it works, at least momentarily. It accomplishes God's purpose with Saul. We'll pick up on that next week. We'll come back to class and we'll pick up on that. And we will finish out. We have a very brief amount of time in this handout. I have a new one printed for you, waiting to be handed out next week. And so we'll get on with that then. Thank you for your good attention. We're dismissed from class.